I didn't know his name then. All I knew was that somewhere across the ocean, another man was rising before dawn the same way I was, devoted, disciplined, loyal to the country that shaped him. Mitsuo Fuchida was inspecting his aircraft, preparing for a future he believed he understood. And on my side of the world, I was restless on my family's Oregon farm, arguing with the people I loved because something inside me was pushing me toward the sky. He had his duty, I had mine. Neither of us imagined how tightly our stories would one day intertwine. I've often thought back to what someone once told him in 1941. War shows a man what he really is. Fuchida dismissed the warning. I probably would have too. But years later, when I learned his story, I realized how that single sentence became a kind of prophecy for both of us. War would expose us, strip us down to the bone, until something new could grow in the ruins. In those early days, Fuchida was preparing for missions he believed would secure Japan's destiny. He was proud, precise, and deeply convinced he was protecting his homeland. Meanwhile, I was a young man who didn't know what to do with the anger swelling inside me. I wanted to serve. I wanted to fight. And after December 7th, that desire turned into a fire I could barely control. I remember the moment the radio blared the news about Pearl Harbor. My heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. Rage, pure and blinding, shot through me. At that exact moment, halfway across the world, Fuchida was shouting, "Torah! Torah! Torah!" leading the attack that set everything into motion. I didn't know his name then, but I hated everything he represented. As the days passed, I wrestled with the weight of what I wanted to do. Should I risk my life just to strike back? And what would I become if I let hatred guide me? I wasn't alone in questions like that. Later, I learned that even Fuchida, despite Japan's early victories, hid doubts of his own. Both of us were putting on masks of certainty while the world burned around us. So I made my choice. I volunteered for the Doolittle Raid, the United States' first strike back at Japan. It was a near-suicidal mission, but I didn't care. I told myself, I'll make them pay. And while I was taking that step, Fuchida continued leading mission after mission, becoming a symbol of Japanese air power. We were locked into the momentum of a war far bigger than either of us. The spiritual thread of my story started quietly, and I couldn't have known then how deeply it would reach into my future. After I was captured, a fellow prisoner shared a Bible with me for a few precious days. And while I sat in a cell, starving, beaten, and angry thousands of miles away, Fuchida was hearing rumors, stories about Christian prisoners who forgave their captors. He didn't understand it. Neither did I. Not yet. The war pushed both of us into extremes. My plane crashed after the raid, and I found myself captured, tortured, and isolated for years. I lived on hatred because it was the only thing that kept me breathing. Fuchida, on the other hand, survived mission after mission, witnessing horrors that chipped away at the certainty he once held. We were both being broken down, piece by piece, until there was barely anything left. My turning point came slowly. When a guard finally handed me a Bible, it felt like a miracle in a place where miracles shouldn't exist. As I read, something in me softened. The hatred that had kept me alive began to loosen its grip. I found myself praying for the very men who were hurting me. And they noticed. Even before I said anything, they sensed something had changed. Meanwhile, Japan's military machine was collapsing, Fuchida was wounded, grounded, and forced to face the emptiness behind the victories he had once celebrated. Later, he would tell people that everything he stood for seemed to crumble at once. In different ways, we were both reaching the midpoint of our stories, a moment when the path we'd been on could no longer continue. My health failed, his nation fell. We were both squeezed from every direction, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I survived, barely. He returned to a homeland scarred beyond recognition. Both of us were left asking a question that echoed in the ruins. Why did all of this happen? For me, the answer came as I learned to forgive the guards who once terrified me. For him, the answer began with a conversation about American prisoners who had forgiven their captors. That kind of mercy stunned him. It didn't fit anything he understood about the world, but it planted a seed in his heart the same way the Bible had started to change mine. When I was finally freed, frail and scarred, I wrote my story. I was a prisoner of Japan. I didn't know who would read it. I just wanted people to understand the transformation I'd experienced. I wanted them to know that hatred isn't the end of a man's story. What I didn't know was that far across the ocean, Fuchida found that very tract in his hands. He read about my rage, my suffering, my forgiveness, and something inside him cracked open. He saw himself in my words, saw the path he had walked, saw the path I had taken out of darkness. And he wanted that same kind of freedom. He bought a Bible, the same book that had saved me, and he devoured it just as I once had. The bitterness that had consumed him melted away. Slowly, quietly, he stepped into a new life. Soon he was telling others about the transformation he'd experienced. Tentative at first, then boldly, he spoke of forgiveness. The former commander of Pearl Harbor was now preaching peace. When he faced mockery from former comrades, he endured it with a calm I recognized, because I had felt that same calm when God lifted the hatred from my own heart. I returned to Japan as a missionary, the very nation where I had known such suffering. And the people who once saw Americans as monsters now listened with open hearts. Newspapers began to spread the unbelievable story of two former enemies walking unexpectedly similar paths. Then the day came when we met for the first time. There was no anger, no lingering resentment, just quiet recognition. Two men who had walked through fire and found something stronger on the other side. Forgiveness had rewritten both of our stories. We spent years speaking together in churches, in camps, in cities, still bearing the scars of war. And everywhere we went, people saw what I had come to understand. Reconciliation is more powerful than revenge. In the end, we stood together on countless stages. Two men who had once been enemies, now united by grace. The war had brought out the worst in us. Faith had brought out the best. And when I think back to that first moment, when the news of Pearl Harbor set my heart ablaze with rage, I realize now that the story wasn't really about war at all. It was about the God who met two broken men on opposite sides of the world and led them toward each other, not to destroy, but to heal. The opening image of my life was fueled by anger. The final image is fueled by grace.